Hi, welcome to my channel. Well, I plan to do not a COVID video, a cult video rather soon, much sooner than actually happened. A few other videos got in the way, but finally I wanted to do this. It's Sunday. I want to do it when I promised, before the Monday and the week and so forth. I wanted to get this up, not rush through it, but I wanted to make sure that I got it done today. All right, so I want to describe how I would create a cult. Now, by cult, I mean the destructive cult. The actual term cult, if I remember correctly, matches the term cultivate. It's my sense is it's an agricultural term. We also have the word culture. It's a group of people that follow a set of ways, rituals, so like a tight knit group of people. Now, it's come to be used pejoratively as to mean a destructive group, usually focused around a single leader, a charismatic leader who's taking advantage of them. Now, I believe the first time I really came across cults was when I was reading about UFOs as a child. I can't remember exactly when, but way back. I became interested in UFOs, and I've been interested in them ever since. Not that I believe that there are visitors from other planets, but it's fascinating. It's a fascinating exposure to perceptions and the way people see things, and human psychology in general. So going along with human psychology, all right, there was a movement in UFO lore in the 1950s and then 60s and so forth. Briefly, 1947, June 24th, 1947, the modern era of UFOs began, and UFO lore, ufology began. Kenneth Arnold is in his plane, and he sees 9 objects, and he clocks their speed, and it seems that they're traveling faster than what he expects normal planes to be able to do, and so he soon reports it, and word spreads, and somebody asks him, how did they behave? And he says, well, they behaved as a saucer would if you skipped it along the water, and so they were termed flying saucer. And so that's how the term flying saucer came about. So this is getting to the interesting part. So that was June 24th, 1947, and then he connects with somebody who's the editor of, I think it's called Amazing Stories magazine. I think he actually had a hunchback, if I'm not sure. He had some kind of, I think it was a birth defect or something. But anyway, kind of a unique tidbit. But it may have played into his interest. I'm not talking about Kenneth Arnold. I'm talking about this editor whose name I can't remember at the moment. Being interested in interesting, like, far out stuff. So he publishes, I believe there was fiction in the magazine. He also becomes interested in Kenneth Arnold's sighting, and he encourages Kenneth Arnold to, I believe, submit and print, so that he could print the story in his magazine. I'm vague on the details of that, but he basically encourages Kenneth Arnold in what he witnessed. And then there were a few other sightings, and then there was a presumed Roswell crash, where everybody knows by now there was a craft that crashes in Roswell, and at some point dead bodies are recovered. That's fascinating in and of itself. That's one of the reasons why I'm interested in ufology. It's the evolution of this myth. Like first it was just like wreckage, and then in a report from the Air Force saying that they'd recovered a flying saucer, and then much later on, in around 1980, there are reports of bodies, and then it's like a myth that just develops and develops and develops. So, anyway, going back to this, George Adamski was one of the first people to write a book claiming that he had ongoing contact with aliens from other planets within the solar system, which is really hard to believe because anyone who knows about these other planets knows they're incapable of supporting life, even on the moon. And so if you dig in further into George Adamski's past, you'll see that he had, I want to say Mount Palomar. Maybe I'm wrong. It comes to mind, but he had a cafe, and he was selling sort of religious, new age literature and philosophy. Like basically, it's clear he came up with this philosophy himself, and he called himself, the master philosopher or something. And he was trying to promote himself as this great teacher. And so it's you could see it right through. No wonder when this UFO wave, this phenomenon hit, he took advantage of that. And I don't remember when his first book was, but it was soon after that Kenneth Arnold sighting. He was claiming, I met with these Venusians or Saturnians or whoever, and I was taken aboard their craft, and they took me around, and they told me to spread the message about their existence, and that the earth should stop wars and so forth, and they come in peace and so forth. And that's very reminiscent of a 1956 film called Earth versus the Flying Saucer. Oh, no, not Earth versus the Flying. Of course, Earth versus the Flying Saucers was great. I mean, I imagine it being something like the Independence Day movie of its time. No, I goofed. In 1951 was the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, and you have a craft landing in Washington, D.C. You have a human walking out and being shot at and so forth, and then he recovers. He goes incognito as a human, naming himself John Carpenter. I think it was John Carpenter, or just Mr. Carpenter. There are religious undertones clearly in this movie, no doubt about it. I mean, there's like a Jesus principle here. He was shot by the military. He recovers, and then he goes incognito as Mr. Carpenter, and he meets up with I think a widowed woman and her son, and travels with the son and so forth. Then he meets with a scientist. So there are religious tones of his name is Mr. Carpenter. Jesus had been it's interesting, the text in Greek, actually, the Koine Greek actually says something like tekton, which I imagine is where we get the term tactile from. I imagine that would mean somebody who works like a craftsman, who works with his hands. It's translated as carpenter, and then people speculate maybe he was originally a mason, and then that figures into Freemasonry and all that. But I haven't done a lot of research. I just know that the actual Greek term is tekton. Anyway, there's this aspect, this element of a superior race of aliens come to Earth, and they have these powers which to us seem magical. and he comes in peace, and he proposes a brotherhood. Like if we learn to live peacefully, we can be able to join this brotherhood. And um, I can see some religious implication. In other words, and actually, in the script, at one point he's shot. It seems fatally shot, and it seems he's dead. Um, and then aboard, and then Gort, the robot, takes him, and his name is Klaatu, by the way. Gort is the robot who then takes him back to the craft and then resuscitates him. And from what I've heard, the studio at that time was really antsy about having any implication that this was a humanoid that was then brought back to life. Like it would be anti-religious, or it would have problems for the religious community in the audience. So they took that part out, and they had Klaatu actually saying, no, no, only I can't remember how he phrased it, but uh, um, only the one being or whoever has the power to resuscitate people from the dead, something like that. But it's in there slightly. Anyway, so you have that movie coming out in 1951, and that's alongside these contactees who claim that people from Venus or Neptune or Saturn or whoever are taking them individually. I remember Truman Bothurum was another one. It's a fascinating period. Each one writing a book, and then the next one to write a book claims to have had an earlier sighting. It's like almost like a contest. And from what I've read in the book by David, oh my gosh, the book is called David Jacobs. The book is called The UFO Controversy in America. I believe, as I recall, he had said that they were also helping each other out. There was a convention of contactees in a convention called I think the Giant Rock, or I think the Giant Rock Convention, and I don't remember where it was. I think it was in the West, like Nevada or New Mexico somewhere, maybe California. And it was just a convention. It was like, you have science fiction conventions, Star Trek conventions. It was simply a convention of these different contactees peddling their material, and they all had tables. It was outdoors, as I recall. I mean, from the pictures, it seems they were outdoors. And in some sense, they were helping each other out. In other sense, they were each trying to outdo the other. So claimed to have been bigger and much earlier, and the first one, earlier before the other ones. So so they were trying to get followings, and they were selling books. I know at least some of them sold more. I know George Adamski published a few books, not just his one. And it's interesting. Sometimes some of these contactees would characterize the aliens. The aliens invariably looked human, and sometimes they would be beautiful women, female aliens that would come, and this is sort of like satisfying or fulfilling a male fantasy. A beautiful Venusian comes over and introduces herself, and the two go off in a spaceship, and da 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 da. No sex mentioned, but you can read, a male contactee claiming to have been met by a beautiful female Venusian or something. You know where that's going. You know what motivated that. So they developed these followings, and so it starts in the 1950s, and then in the 1960s it continues. And in fact, I should mention, there's somebody in Switzerland who Um, Boy, it's been a long time since I've read UFO lore. I don't remember his name, but I remember the book that was published about him was called Light Years, and he had only one arm. I think there was an accident that took the other arm, and the alien that he claimed gave him knowledge was named Samyazi, and there's like thick packets of notes that he claimed to have transcribed from the aliens and he claimed that they came from the Pleiades. And see, it's interesting that at the beginning, during the early contactee movement, there would be claims, oh, I saw humans on the moon working together, or I saw, like Russians and Americans and so forth working together on the moon, or I saw other alien creatures on the moon, and they had cities. And I visited, I was taken aboard by a Venusian or a Saturnian or somebody from another planet within our solar system. It's interesting that they claimed that, and then as we were exploring these planets and the human population became more educated in terms of what's possible and what's not possible on these other planets, it seems that they went the origins of these benevolent brother aliens or sister aliens went further and further out. So now they're like coming from the Pleiades or coming from somewhere further out there. In the interim, some had made statements against. All right, let me rephrase that. In the interim, they had been called to the carpet about their claims not matching what we know scientifically. So some had mentioned they don't understand that. They're sticking to their claims. Of course, how could they? They would seem like they were lying if they didn't. I must mention there's a fascinating documentary. It's available on YouTube. Last time I checked, it's called Farewell Good Brothers. And if you want to see these contactees speaking, actually on camera speaking, check out Farewell Good Brothers. It doesn't show Truman Bethurum, but it shows a number of these other ones, Howard Menger, and a number of other ones, and you see how they spoke and what their claims were and so forth. So, and later, like 70s and 80s, this is turning into a UFO contactee video. I'm going to get to the purpose of the video, which is be about how I would create a cult. So let me turn to these notes that I have. There are a few key things that I would create in my cult. I would isolate. First of all, I would attract these members. In order to do that, I would love bomb them. I would tell them that love bombing means that you verbally shower them with comments about how great you think they are, so forth, to encourage the prospective member to think that they're joining something wonderful and that they're accepted, and they may feel alienated in other culture. And I would target people who seem to be lost philosophically, perhaps in college, when they're away from their homes. I would target those who are searching for answers. I would search for those who don't have a steady fix on their perspective of on any perspective of the rest of the world. Like, what's the meaning of life? These high philosophical questions. What's the meaning of life? Where do I fit in? How can I fit in? And so forth. Or just pure curiosity and naivete as well. So you get them when they're young. You find those that are not well educated in terms of science. You get them when they're young. You get those who aren't necessarily well versed in science or critical thinking skills. That's very important. And you get the ones that are very curious or very open minded. Okay, and you love bomb them. You create this group. Now, what was it? Jim Jones created Jonestown. What he did was, it's an awful massacre that happened later, and I'll try to remain sanitized when I say this for YouTube's sake. He started off by creating like a form of communism. He encouraged people to share and get together in a group so that they feel like they're part of something special, and they feel like they have a brother and sister, and it's all in a community. So then, for whatever purpose, he then transported them away from the United States. I think it was it South America or Africa? Anyway, he transported them to another country, a remote, a faraway country, and they're alone in this jungle area. And so escape would be very difficult. And he then changed it. It's something like George Orwell's 1984. Or those dystopia novels. You start off with something nice and something that seems very constructive, very peace-loving, and something that would be wonderful if it could be spread to the rest of humanity. And then, little by little, you include certain things that would be counter to that. You would start saying that we are special, and those are essentially the infidels, or the other, or they aren't as progressive as we are, or they don't believe as we do. They aren't as mature, or they aren't as good-natured, though they aren't as good as we are. So that's another element. And then, in the example of Jim Jones, there were already people who were questioning things that seemed contradictory to the belief system. And from what I understand, a lot of them that drank, it wasn't Kool-Aid, it was a flavored liquid of some kind. It was really poison. And from what I understand, a lot of them were not drinking it voluntarily. They were forced to drink it. All right, so let me go back to this. So I have this tight-knit group that considers anyone outside their group to be, well, at least in the beginning, to be less informed, not fortunate enough to be part of this group. And so, let me see. Isolate them, cut them off from the community, cut them off in terms of contact with their families, with anyone in the outside world. I would say the outside world is evil, or it's destructive, and it would poison your mind. Something like that. Something that would prevent you from even wanting to have interaction or some kind of social interaction with the outside world, particularly your family. And then, as I say this, notice a cult is not necessarily only religious. You can find it in politics, you can find it in self-help groups, you can find it in like supernatural or new agey groups, you can even find it in marketing. So I'm being vague about religious types of cult groups on purpose because I want you to notice the specific traits and techniques. There's a wonderful book. Others have written about cults and cult methods, but I do want to mention a book by Margaret Thaler Singer that's been mentioned a number of times, where she outlines the precise methodologies behind these groups. All right, so isolation is number one. Number two is special terminology. This is a technique in order to confuse people's minds and to inhibit the follower's mind from trying to understand or piece together actual meanings behind the terms. They will throw it around like pseudoscience terms. It could seem even like gobbledygook, the terminology. But as long as you use the terminology and you repeat the terminology, you're fine. There's an enormous level of social pressure and peer pressure that's enforced, so that if you that you must use this special terminology, and that's a way of breaking down even, I suspect, your ability to use the English language or whatever your native familiar language is. It's a way of breaking down how your brain functions. And number three is eliminate critical thinking. And then there's punishment for questioning the doctrine. So I would set up a number of doctrines, and I would have regular, routine gatherings where I would have people report on how they felt and so forth, and I would have some kind of tell me if this doesn't seem reminiscent of something, some worldwide event. Okay, I would encourage people to spy on each other, or to keep tabs on each other, and to be able to report back only to myself anything that they see in other people that doesn't fit with the doctrine. So you basically have, I'm trying to remember the term, you basically have like whistleblowers, but in a negative term, people spying on other people. Now, Hitler used that in the 1930s. Anybody who seemed to disagree, children could spy and report on their parents. Friends could report on each other. There's a very interesting movie. It was a miniseries movie in, I believe, 1983 called V, the letter V, and it was over 2 nights, and it's Kenneth Johnson, who had earlier adapted the comic book The Incredible Hulk into a TV series, and he wanted to, from what I read, he wanted to, in an interview with him online, he wanted to do a miniseries movie about the Holocaust and Hitler's Germany and so forth, and he wanted to do it, he wanted to show it if it could happen in the United States. I think that was his gimmick. But instead, he chose to do it as an alien invasion idea, where these visitors, V, come to Earth and they promise they will cure cancer. They will they will bring incredible benefits to humanity, and so the humans welcome them in, and they look like us and so forth. And there are a few. There are some interesting characters, some interesting Jewish characters. There's a Jewish family. There's a grandfather. There's a grandfather, and then like a son and a wife. I think the grandfather's child was the father, right? And then he had a wife, and then they had a child. And there's another person, a young kid who is not life isn't working out for him. He hasn't been able to hold a steady job, I believe, and it's just life is just difficult. And so the aliens developed this youth program, and this is reminiscent of Hitler's youth movement. It's literally called Hitler's Youth, and boy, I hope I don't get copyright stricken for this. But anyway, and then there are brown shirts that comes later, and the uniform for this alien youth group was brown shirt, and I think that's on purpose. Even even the symbol of these aliens from planet orbiting Sirius was clearly was a dot and some line, like a line and some dots, and it's clearly in the formation of a swastika to really hammer home the point. Anyway, this character, young character who's in the youth movement of these aliens, then spies and reports, actually uses that as a threat that he's going to report on them to the aliens. So anyway, going back to my cult, hypothetical cult, I would have people being able to secretly report on each other to me directly. I would have regular meetings where everybody sits and they confess their innermost fears and desires. They basically spill their beans on what they fear, what they enjoy, so that I can be able to use that to manipulate them. I read a book, can't remember A Family of Secrets. I don't know if this is true or not, but I'll even keep vague. I won't mention the name of the university or whatever, but it's one thing I want to mention about that as part of this ritual, they would reveal some secret about themselves. And so people have commented on that technique as being a way that the leaders of the group can blackmail you. If you revealed, like for example, in an initiation, if you reveal some secret to yourself, about yourself, to the group or to one of the leaders, then it would be written down and it could be it could be used later as blackmail should you decide to rebel against them. So I would have these followers work round the clock, doing something or other, but just keep working, keep laboring, and have little sleep. I would rigorously restrict their diet. I would, in fact, reduce the amount of calories that they have. I would have them practically malnourished, but still at a point where they could continue to do physical labor. I would reduce the number of hours that they sleep so that humans need REM sleep. It's critical that people sleep the full amount, which is typically 7 or 8 hours. 7 hours may be cutting it short, but typically like 7 or 8 hours. I suspect that during that sleep, the mind is processing thoughts and processing what's happened. It's basically processing helter-skelter thoughts and putting them in some kind of order. It's like it's doing spring cleaning. It's basically a regular cleaning. And if you don't let the brain do that cleaning process and organization process, like even a computer requires some time to defragment, basically put things in order. If you don't let the brain do that, then it won't function as well. So I would reduce their amount of time that they can be able to sleep. I would keep them busy working so that they don't have time to think and ponder the higher thoughts, like what are we doing here? Um, does this really make sense? Um, doesn't this doctrine contradict an earlier doctrine? Stuff like that. And I would restrict their certainly restrict their contact with news, restrict their contact with the scientific process. I would heavily cut off their critical thinking skills. Let me see. No personal possessions. Everyone is equal. Eliminate distinct identity. Yes, I would try my best to eliminate any possibility of them identifying as somebody unique. What traits make you unique? What traits, like your name? Sometimes in these groups, they would take on a new name when they join. Now, that could be a positive way. That could be a fun-loving way. Like my name in this group is this, and it's a nickname. But if you don't take it as a nickname, if you take it as like the name is now ingrained into you, then it's fooling around with your sense of your own identity. Particularly if all the names sound similar, almost like person one, person two, person three. If you are named if you're no longer known as Jamie Phillips, and you're now known as person 746, kind of I mean that's really stretching it, but hypothetically, then it could work detrimentally on your own sense of where you came from, what things you enjoyed, and so forth. Now the leader, deify the leader. Now I would keep mentioning over and over how smart I am. I would point to certain things that seemed prophetic. I shouldn't say prophetic meaning doesn't necessarily mean predicting things in the future. It means prophetic means I'm receiving knowledge from a deity to impart, to spread to the rest of the world. So I guess you could say the contactees in the UFO phenomenon were technically prophets. They weren't true prophets, apparently, because the scientific method worked against them, but they were technically prophets, UFO prophets. So I would claim to have this special knowledge, presumably from aliens or from God or from some special higher source. And anything that contradicted what I had said would not be questioned. I would make sure that could not be questioned. I would come up with some explanation to reconcile these two statements, the one I had made before and the one that I had made now, so as to seem like both are true. Now, and I would also use that element of spying on your neighbor and your companion and so forth to make sure that nobody's questioning what I'm saying. And I would also, now the next thing is I would publish literature. I would publish at least one Bible that people could pass out at gatherings, at community events. Oh, another thing I didn't mention before is that, especially when I'm forming this, I would form this group under the guise that it's something benevolent, so that the rest of the outside world wouldn't catch on to the fact that it's a destructive cult, designed to be a destructive cult. I would come up with I would label this organization some kind of peaceful organization doing good works for humanity, or helping your fellow man, or helping some minority group or something like that, to make people, not only make the followers believe that they're engaged in a very constructive, altruistic, higher calling type of work, but that the outside world would think that this is a great organization and wouldn't pay a lot of attention to what's going on. Um, and I would also mention the love bombing, do the love bombing, which I've mentioned before. So that's the end of my list here, and I will leave you with that. Now, as I said before, I want to remind you a few things. The movie that I mentioned, 1951 movie, is called The Day the Earth Stood Still. If you want to look at UFOs, UFO contactees, watch them actually speaking. The documentary is called Farewell Good Brothers, and it's some of it is comical. It's not broadly comical, but there are comedic nuances in there. It's a total documentary. There's a book, again, about a UFO cult group called When Prophecy Fails, and this is a book that it's not a recent book. This book goes back. It's called When Prophecy Fails. It's about it documents, it tells the story of a real UFO cult group that, as I recall, claimed that the world would end. Oh, that's another thing. The Doomsday. There's a whole like subcategory of cult groups, the Doomsday cult, where you've got to claim that the world is ending and we've got to do this labor. Whatever you're doing, you're encouraging your followers to do this labor, and you've got to perhaps have to encourage other followers to join. You've got to do something before the end of the world or some great calamity occurs. So when the calamity did not occur in this When Prophecy Fails event, when the calamity did not occur, the leader then had to give an explanation why it didn't occur. There was a miscalculation. You've probably come across this when in religious circles, when somebody says the world will end at this time. I looked in the Bible, the Christian Bible, and I've figured out, I predict that the world will end based on what the Bible says, that the world will end in 1980, December 31st, 1980, or hypothetically, whatever. And when it doesn't come, whoops, no, I made a miscalculation. No, I meant it's 1981 or something like that, or 1990 or something. So it's a sad story. The When Prophecy Fails story. If I remember correctly, a number of them sold their possessions. Again, going back to that statement about nobody owns anything. Give away your possessions, join the group, and everybody is on equal terms. Yes, of course, on equal terms, except the leader, who many times gets the possessions donated from the followers. So he gets rich and they don't. People have commented about a narcissistic personality type that often is associated with this leader. So when prophecy fails, a number of them, I'm thinking, left the group, and a number of them stayed on and so forth. This happens sometimes in cult groups where some members just immediately have had enough and they just leave, and then the remaining followers continue until, hopefully not, some act where some drastic act. There's again, going back to UFO lore, he went by several names. Marshall Applewhite. It's amazing I'm recalling these names now. Marshall Applewhite had questions about his own homosexual leanings, and he wanted to be castrated. He felt uncertain. He felt like he couldn't express it. Either he was wrong or misguided, or something was wrong about himself. He meets, if I remember correctly, I'm not sure about this, but he meets a woman, and the two of them go under the title Bo and Peep. Um, I think there was a previous nickname for the two, like Bo and Peep. That may have been later. That may have been their second set of nicknames, pair of nicknames. I remember there were two different pairs of nicknames. One at the beginning and later on when he develops this UFO cult group. Now, he eventually, I don't remember exactly when, but he gathers together a group of believers, and was it 1996, 1997, something like that? One of those 2 years. There was a comet, Hale-Bopp, that was streaking along, and it was predicted to arrive, be seen by astronomers and a number of other people. It was going to be a big event. And so, from what I've read, they had already believed that they were destined to join him in this craft to venture into outer space. It may have been to venture to another planet. I don't remember. But they were already on that, and convinced of that. That was already their plan. And it simply, Hale-Bopp, news of Hale-Bopp approaching Earth simply fed into this plan, this already staged plan. So they believe that this comet Hale-Bopp was a sign or some kind of way that they could then travel to this other planet or travel further off the Earth. And they had, I don't want to become gruesome about it, they had their haircuts. They had their hair cut identically. So again, that's eliminating any sense of individuality, individual style, any individual sense of personality, whatever, identity. And I think some of them I think he encouraged them to, men and women. For the men, if I remember correctly, he had, the snip snip. He encouraged the snip snip a lot. So, and then I believe he himself also had the snip snip. The snip snip. And that, I think that kind of goes along with him earlier in life feeling awkward about his homosexual orientation, perceived homosexual orientation that he felt. So this was all planned, and there was one, in fact, there was one sibling of a Star Trek actor from the 1960s. If I remember correctly, it was it Nichelle Nichols who played Lieutenant Uhura in Star Trek in 1966. I think it was her brother. If I have it right. He was a member of this group, and they were they used they used the term away team, which is a term from Star Trek, Star Trek: The Next Generation. So they were heavily. It was almost like a Star Trek convention. I mean, if I remember correctly, they were even wearing like jumpsuits that looked like you'd see in a knockoff of a Star Trek TV series, like the Orville or something. So it's fascinating how you get like these science fiction. You get this group of followers to a leader in a UFO cult, and yet it's almost like they were also science fiction or Star Trek fans. It's almost like a Star Trek convention or science fiction group, Star Trek group. They could trade terminology, and again, that works into the use of special terminology. They would use away team, I believe, to refer to venturing off the Earth and going into space, and they would use these science fiction terms, and so they were very happy. They were very communal, and so he had this very loving face. He would do these videos. There were recordings. Each one made a recording, essentially saying final goodbye to their family. And um, what was Marshall Apple? Marshall Applewhite went by another name. I know it was Bo and Peep, but um, I believe there was another name that he went by. That Bo and Peep thing that recalls the fact that there were two of them. Reminds me of Truman. No, not Truman, but Howard Menger. I believe it's Howard Menger, who was an earlier UFO contactee from I believe it was the 1960s. Had a mustache and so forth. One of his followers, like one, he wrote this book or one of several books, and somebody who had been interested, like kind of entranced by his tales, met and then they married. So I can see some parallel, interesting parallel. Like here's I believe it's Marshall that was Bo, and then Peep would have been the woman, if I have it right. She is entranced by him, and the two are a couple. And the same way earlier, the follower of Howard Menger meets him, and then the two become a couple, and they live together and so forth. So that's interesting. It's sort of, I guess, like an adherent or somebody who admires, the idea of celebrity worship. And like, for example, for a long time, I hadn't hero worshipped Madonna, but I had an attraction and a crush, a celebrity crush to Madonna. And I guess it could be something like that. You develop a crush or an admiration for someone. Interestingly enough, how many of you have seen the movie The Terminator? I've seen video reactions, first-time reactions on YouTube to the movie The Terminator. And I won't give away a lot of it, but there's somebody who goes back in time, and he has this photograph, and he says, one of the most, perhaps people would think it's one of the most romantic things that's been said in a film. I've come across time for you, and he mentions her name. And so people seeing this for the first time, they just latch on to, oh, wow, that's weird. How come he just falls in love with her based on simply a photograph of her? Faded photograph of her. No. They miss that he had heard legends and stories about her. So it's more than just the photograph. When you've read about somebody you admire very much and these great deeds, these perhaps almost superhuman deeds that they've achieved, you might develop an affection for them. So that may work into this, the cult mentality. So I believe I've mentioned quite a bit about what I want to say about cults. I may do another one in the future if I can think of stuff I haven't mentioned here. So comment below. What do you think of this video? I've been forgetting to mention, if you like these videos, if you like this type of content, I am introspective. I talk about psychology. I talk about my own experiences and trying to understand myself better. I presume that there are other people who have had similar experiences. I want to understand simply how our minds work. Our minds probably work in similar ways. Why do they work in those similar ways? I also want to explore theories about outer space, theories about, as I said before, psychology and UFOs, and why we believe certain things that we do in the paranormal and the Bible, the Jewish Bible or even the Christian Bible, theories about history and so forth, trying to piece together our universe and how it operates and so forth. So if you like that, stay tuned, maybe subscribe to this channel, and certainly like this video if you do like it, because I'm trying to boost those algorithms, those YouTube algorithms that they talk about. I have been getting some more views, and more interestingly, more prized by me, more valued by me, more subscribers. I hope that I would get something like that, because I believe that this content is worthwhile to spread around. So if you like that, subscribe, spread the word, and like this video, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.